All right, thank you for coming to hear about my talk today. My name is Sasha Loewen. I am a PhD student at Montana State University, and today I'll be telling you about some of my work in organic agricultural systems and how we use data intensively to adaptively manage those systems. So just quickly go over the background and research question that we're looking at. Then I'll get into some of the methodologies that we use and some preliminary results that we have from a field site in Manitoba. And then discuss some of the future projects that we're working on, including soil fertility, weed issues in the systems, and software outputs that we plan to produce. So the research problem, ag's challenges, of course, are commonly known as agriculture and farmers are dealing with climate uncertainty, dealing with issues of ecological degradation due to farming practices, and then, of course, population growth is putting greater stress on ag more generally. And so different ways to address these challenges. One of the ideas that has come up recently is this idea of sustainable intensification. How can we sustainably intensify our systems to produce more, but also protect the environment? And so another thing that has come up though is this idea of organic agriculture as a solution, as it's generally regarded as a more sustainable practice and less damaging to ecological systems. But of course, one of the issues with organic agriculture, one of its major critiques is that it tends to have generally lower yields. And so my project is attempting to use all of the data coming out of agricultural systems off of tractors, off of implements, off of satellite imagery, use all of that free data that's just sitting out there, harness all of that to try to confront some of these issues and hopefully improve organic agriculture and so that it can compete with conventional agriculture and in a way sustainably intensify its management. And so all of these things kind of come together as a possible solution for how we can address some of these major challenges that agriculture is facing. So the major question that I'm looking at with my research is how can we use on-farm precision experimentation to improve farmers' knowledge about their fields and their farms and thereby increase their yields and net returns and make them more resilient overall. And so this idea of on-farm precision experimentation has been around for a while, but it's becoming more popular and more applicable now that we are living through this era of big data. And so what is on-farm precision experimentation? It begins with a farmer-driven question. So this can be, how do I apply a certain input more appropriately across my field more efficiently? And then this leads to a collaboration with a scientist partner to develop field-scale experiments using their own machinery, after which the output of the experiment, typically the yield, is analyzed to understand what the effect of the input had across that field to develop efficient input systems for that field, particularly as we learn about that system over time. So on-farm precision experimentation, here's a quick overview of what that looks like. So we begin with a prescription map and an experimental design, which is some varied input across the entire field. So some people in my lab work with varied nitrogen rates in conventional egg systems. I'm working with organic farmers, and so what we're varying across the field is seed, either for a cash crop or a green manure cover crop. So we put that in, that's our design, and then we go in and collect as much data as we possibly can. So at the very top there, you see something called active data acquisition. That's what I'm calling the things that I'm doing as a grad student to collect data as we're going through this as a proof of concept to try to understand the system. So that's soil sampling, biomass sampling, and so on. But everything else in there, in the blue, in the automated data acquisition, that's all data that we aim to collect for free and make it automatically part of the process to make this process as simple and applicable for a farmer as possible. And so things like remote sensing, NDVI of previous years, weather data up to the point of some decision making, and then the as applied map, which comes off of, in this case, the seeder that the farmer uses. And then once the crop is up and we've collected it, we collect the yield monitor data, and that comes off of the combine. And that's the output of the experiment, which we base our results on. And then finally, economic data, we want to make this overall an economic model so that the farmer understands how much money they are making or losing by developing these practices. And all of that goes into our analysis, which we run to try to determine what is the optimum input rate at each point on the field over an entire field. So once we have that, then we can go back. You can see this blue arrow along the bottom. We go back with this new idea, this new optimization model of what the field would be best optimized for that input, and we put that in as a new prescription map for the following year and continue the experiment along. And that's the crucial part, that this doesn't occur just once, but this occurs year over year, so that we start to really understand how this field works as a system and how we can efficiently manage it. So we have a number of field sites set up across the Northern Great Plains, a number in Montana. Today I'm going to show you an example from one in Manitoba, where I'm actually from. And so I'll take you through that now. So the experiment is here. What we did was we varied spring wheat seeding rates across a quarter section. So this is about 160 acres or 70 hectares. And we've put in 3 different seeding rates across the entire field. So treating the entire field as one experimental unit. We then go through and collect as much data as we can, like I said, about that field. So here's a elevation map from that field. We collected NDVI data from previous years to try to understand where variation occurs across that field over time. And then, yeah, of course, that as applied map, which in this case looks the same as the experimental map. This comes off of the seeder and the tractor. And then once the crop is up, we collect the data off of the yield monitor, off of the combine. So here what you see is the raw yield map, which comes off of the combine. We process that a bit to remove some of the outliers, some of the machine errors and so on, and that becomes the output of our model. So then, of course, we take economic returns into account when trying to understand what the economic impact of this system would be for the farmer. And all of that then goes into our analysis. So here are some quick results from that specific seeding experiment that we did in 2019 in Manitoba. So in this figure here, you can see seed rate is along the x-axis. So we have the low rate, the medium rate, and the high rate. And the output is the wheat yield in tons per hectare along the y-axis. And you can see that there's not a huge difference, but there is a difference, and it is significant. So the lower seeding rate did have the lowest yield overall, and all the way up to the highest seeding rate, where we saw the highest seeding rate overall. And that would be great for a traditional experiment where we just wanted to know, okay, what is the best seeding rate average for this field? But what we want to know here is how do these seeding rates vary across the field? So one factor that we found to be particularly important was elevation. So if we add elevation to this model and we say how did the seeding rates interact with elevation to affect yield across the entire field, we see that again, so just to explain this figure quickly, the elevation is along the x-axis now, yield is still along the y-axis, and we have the 3 seeding rates in the 3 colors there. And you can see the blue, which is the highest seeding rate, does outcompete the other 2 seeding rates generally across most of the field at the various elevations. But when we start getting to the higher elevations, the relationship inverts, and the lowest seeding rate actually outcompetes the other seeding rates. And so we start to see how elevation can affect these different seeding rates, and we see how different points on the field really would do better with different seeding rates in them. And so just to take this up a notch, so we can combine all of these things into a broader model where we take our seeding rate, we take our elevation, we add NDVI from previous years, and we put that as a function of yield to try to come up with what would be the optimized seeding rate, knowing all of this now after that year of experimentation. And we come up with this new seeding rate model where you see the seeding rate, the ideal seeding rates there, where the heaviest seeding rate is dominant across the field, the medium seeding rate gets a lot of portion, and then the lowest seeding rate is only a tiny part of the field. So that becomes our optimized seeding rate, our understanding of optimized seeding rate from this model. We take that then and we put that into the following year, we put that in as our optimized model. The next time we plant wheat on this field, we can use this as our base for an optimized model of seeding rate. But the key point here now is that we don't stop with the experimentation. So we keep putting in experimental strips across this field generally so that we can keep understanding how this field will interact with seeding rate over time and over many seasons. So just to summarize there's our original design that we put in randomized strips across the field, and then we come up with this new optimized design, which tells us what would be the most efficient way from that single year of information to plant these seeding rates. And so just to bring it home with some economics here, this is what the net return in US dollars per hectare, this figure here on the left, what the farmer actually got from this field. So there's what actually happened. This was the so-called experiment. That's what the farmer actually made this year. Now, if the farmer had applied what they normally would, that average rate across the entire field, they actually would have made a bit more according to our model. They would have made about $15 or $20 more per hectare using that average rate. But if they use the variable rate model that we came up with from this experiment, they would expect to make upwards of $30 more per hectare if all conditions being the same. And so what this tells us is that, okay, the experiment did cost the farmer something, but what we've learned has the potential to make the farmer this much more. So that's in an idealized world, but that's what we're aiming for. So just to summarize all of this, on-farm precision experimentation looks like it has a lot of opportunity in organic systems. We think that this system could be quite profitable for farmers, but we are waiting on more years of data before we figure all of that out. So moving on into the future, we want to pursue on-farm precision experimentation on all 5 farms that we're working with, and pursue some specific aspects of it. What I showed you earlier, the example was the example I showed you earlier was of a cash crop seeding experiment. We also have some seeding experiments where we're varying the seeding rates of the green manures. So here you see a field of peas. Organic farmers often grow nitrogen fixing crops as a source of nitrogen for their crops. And so we're trying to see if we can vary that to optimize those seeding rates as well. We also have one farmer who applies blood meal as a nitrogen top dress. We want to see if that could be a potential use of on-farm precision experimentation and other sources of fertility. Of course, in organic systems, weeds play a major factor. So we're also doing some mapping of perennials. Pictured here is an image from a drone where we have one of our fields with varied seeding rates, and you can see all the thistle patches growing on that field. And so part of the research in the future is going to incorporate how can we vary our seeding rates to combat weed distributions across a farmer's field. And then finally, the output from all of this experiment is going to be some sort of open source software application, which we've already been working on, and this will integrate everything that we've been working on. It'll allow the farmer themselves to hopefully develop these experiments and run these experiments on their own without too much assistance from scientists. So that is all I've got for today. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. And thank you to everyone who's helped me put this talk together and all our sources of funding. And thank you very much.